Hey, good afternoon. My name is Mark. I'm with Kytheramoto, and what we do here is we do video topics for the adventure motorcycle rider. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about hyperthermia. But before I get into that, I'm just going to show you, quickly who I am. My name is Mark. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic. I was a wilderness paramedic for many years in the 90s. Wilderness steward for the Forest Service. I was park ranger for a season when I retired in Idaho state parks at Hell's Gate State Park. And I worked as an OHV park ranger for 2 seasons seasonally for the Bureau of Land Management out of Lakeview, Oregon. I live in Oregon, do primarily riding in the Northwest, and I have a BMW 1250 GSA trophy and a KTM 890 that I do most of my backcountry, back roads type of traveling. So, with my background, I just want to present some of these topics to you guys, and hopefully, it will really make your traveling a little less hazardous, a little more comfortable, and definitely, hopefully, a little safer. So, today we're going to talk about hyperthermia, which is heat related illness. It's heat illness for the adventure motorcyclists. We've all been on our motorcycles and felt like a baked potato, because we're geared up. We have abrasion resistant coats and pants and boots and all sorts of layers and various things. So we all get really hot. This is more or less just an awareness for you guys that you understand what heat related illness is, and maybe you can recognize whether you are becoming heat ill or you notice somebody else that could be coming having a heat related illness or episode. So it's pretty straightforward. This is not designed to teach you guys this is not a class by no means, but more of an awareness. So hyperthermia, key factors, right? I mean, anytime you get a fever, you get the flu, stuff like that, you become hyperthermic. It's a defense mechanism for the body. If you're riding in the desert, you say you're going to do the Utah BDR or the old first section of the Oregon BDR, and you're going to be in the high desert, you're probably going to do it sometime in June or July or August. You're going to be in some hot weather, high solar radiation, and peak times, and the middle part of the day gets pretty hot. You can acclimate to the hot weather. Your body becomes a little more adapt at keeping your internal body temperature in normal range, and that takes about 8 to 14 days. So if you do plan on doing a trip where you're going to be exposed some really hot weather, take a week, if you can arrive early and spend a few days in the hot weather, and it can help all basically throughout your whole trip. Hypohydration, what does that mean? Well, it means basically a lack of fluid intake. Okay, so very, very important. You're going to realize that dehydration or becoming dehydrated is going to be a common factor by a lot of these challenges that backcountry travel experience, especially runners and bike packers and things like that, mountain biking and all sorts of other activities. Obviously, in the backcountry, when you're in the desert and you're exposed to high heat and high solar radiation. So again, here the main theme at this whole Kytheramoto is to hydrate, electrolytes, hydrate. Poor ventilated clothing. Do you really need to have abrasion resistant clothing riding 2-track in the desert? Well, the answer is maybe, if you guys want to do something like that. But generally, no. And I'm going to do a video in future about clothing and difference between asphalt and dirt roads, right? I mean, asphalt is fixed, right? It's not going to move. If you hit it, asphalt's not going to move. You're going to slide across it, creating friction burns, and you basically have, abrasions to your skin, things like that, right? So we wear these abrasion-related clothing. We pay an awful lot of money for that safety factor. In the backcountry, do you need that? Well, if you're on a gravel road, things like that, it's more or less like sliding on ball bearings. So there's a little bit different. I don't want to get sidetracked too much, but there's a difference. So you have the opportunity, if you're doing desert travel, to really ventilate by either removing that outer clothing and just using internal armor and a light shirt, which we'll go over in future videos. Overexertion takes, at least I ride KTM 890, and sometimes it's a lot of work, right? I mean, it's definitely a lot of work when you're navigating desert terrain, hills, rocks, vegetation, things like that. So overexertion definitely can be a key factor. Overexposure to solar radiation and heat. The Earth gets heated by the sun through infrared radiation, and it heats you up, it heats your motorcycle up. If you're wearing dark clothing, if your coat is, not a light color, black, dark blue, things like that, it will absorb infrared radiation and it will become hotter quicker. Helmets, things like that. So again, overexposure to solar radiation and heat. Be aware that when you go spend sometimes thousands of dollars on a coat, be mindful of the color of the clothing that you're going to be wearing if you're riding in the desert environment during peak solar radiation and heat. July, August, when the sun is high in the sky and you got to deal with it. And sometimes it can be brutal. Other wellness related facts is smoking, obesity, high sugar intake resulting in dehydration effects. What do I mean by that? There are videos out there of guys in Fields, Oregon, drinking those really, really good, huge half-gallon milkshakes before they start the first section of the Oregon BDR. If you do that, be mindful that if you intake or ingest a lot of high sugar food through osmosis, that's going to draw fluid out of your system and into your digestive system for your body's trying to dilute that, eliminate over sugar that it doesn't need. It's going to excrete it through the kidneys, things like that. So you become more dehydrated with a high sugar ingestion. So be aware of that. Be aware of that. Maybe not the best choice in the world, as good as they are, maybe not the best choice of food when you're dealing with hyperthermia, the possibility of creating hyperthermia. And remember that underlying factor is hypohydration or becoming dehydrated. There's a study once too that the average person, since we live in the Northwest, I love coffee. We all love our energy drinks and coffee and things like that. That we walk around on the average of 6 to 8% dehydrated already, right? So that's very, very important. I am going to do a video specifically on dehydration, but now that we're on the topic, how do you know that you're dehydrated? Well, it's what your urine output is, right? And what the color of your urine is. Light yellow to clear, good. Dark yellow, dark orange. If you're not taking vitamin B12 or vitamin B, okay, dark color and a low volume means that you could possibly be dehydrated. And stay ahead of the curve. Very, very important, because you're going to find that it's linked to a lot of things. All right, different types of heat illness. The first one, heat syncope. What is that? Well, your internal plumbing is not optimal. Maybe it's 75%. You're a little dehydrated. You take a break, you sit down, and then you getting ready to get back on your motorcycle. You're taking a break or whatever, and you stand up too quick, and your your blood vessels dilate and you have a fainting spell, essentially, or you feel really dizzy and you have to sit down again. Not a super big deal, just means you need to drink and you need to have some electrolytes. And the way you treat that basically is lay down, put your feet up for a little bit, take a break, rehydrate, and take your time. But all these things are important because we're riding motorcycles, right? We're riding motorcycles. You riding motorcycles a little faster than I am, for sure. But we're all riding motorcycles and we need to have good mental fitness, good physical fitness, and really be on top of our game. Heat exhaustion. There's multiple levels. I want you to be aware of it. I don't want to go through, you know, I will just a little bit. Okay. When your internal body temperature average is 98.6, right? We all know that. We take our temperature when we're kids, we're getting, sick and we have fever, 98.6. Anything above that, we got a fever, we get to stay home from school. Our skin temperature, okay, on our skin is 95 degrees, right? And so, not to get really too much in the weeds, but depending on humidity, depending on what clothing you have, depending on a lot of these things, you can become heat exhaustion. There's multiple levels where if you're anything from, you're working really hard, you're a little bit dehydrated, you get up around 100, 102, maybe even 104 internal temperature, you can become heat exhausted. And that when you start to feel sick, you start to feel pale, you might be sweating profusely, your body's really, really trying to cool down. And you can tell when somebody's struggling. You can tell when you're feeling like you just need to take a break and struggle. And we'll get into some treatment here pretty soon, but you're struggling and you're becoming heat exhausted. It happens a lot in the construction industry and things like that. In 1964, the U.S. Army did a study with a couple battalions, and don't quote me completely on that. I don't know how many people were in the desert, but it was a big exercise. And in Southern California, in the desert, and they had all their soldiers drink at least 8 quarts of water a day. That's a lot. That's like 2 gallons of water throughout the whole day, right? Not one soldier had a heat-related illness at all. And Operation Desert Storm and other operations in the desert, things like that, drinking water was a requirement. A matter of fact, in the 70s, the Israeli army would court-martial you if you didn't drink your certain amount of water, okay, that you have to have. So water is hugely important because it keeps your plumbing up, keeps your ability to sweat and then evaporative. It needs wind, evaporation off your skin and keep that internal temperature down. There's multiple different levels of heat exhaustion, so be aware of that. Oops. So heat cramps, you're going to know when you get one. Heat cramps is mainly not only a hypohydration effect, but it's also lack of needed electrolytes, right? So having that liquid IV in your bottle, you should have a water bottle specifically or water bladder, however you get water into your system. Make sure that you put some electrolytes in and eat well as well. You can get a lot of your electrolytes through food, but if you're drinking throughout the day, liquid IV is a must. How you deal with if somebody gets a heat cramp in a leg or one of the large muscles or whatever, just massage it out, hydrate, cool down, and take a break, get out of the sun, and massage that affected area, and you should bounce back fairly quick. Heat stroke. Misinformation on YouTube from some adventure motorcyclists who say that, well, this guy was having heat stroke, so we had to send him home. No, heat stroke is a true emergency. You have to take action to cool the patient down immediately. All right, so that is the extreme version of heat illness. You can really describe someone, their mental status are going to be confused, maybe even unconscious. Their skin might be dry, really red and dry, might still be wet. but you could tell that they are sick. They look sick and they're hot to the touch, and they need to be cooled down immediately because they're basically baking at this point. Okay, so almost in a literal sense. So heat stroke, if you want to know more, look it up, Google it, do whatever you need to do. But heat stroke is a true emergency. You have to take action to cool the patient down immediately. So recognizing, so like I just talked about, decreased mental status. You may have red, dry skin, like I said, warm to the touch, rapid pulse, taking your pulse, on your wrist. Everybody should, I mean, you can practice it and learn it right here. And the patient really looks sick. Strip the clothing off, get out of the sun, get a sun umbrella or a temporary shelter, as we talked about before, and start cooling that patient down. So this is something you cool the patient rapidly. Prognosis is a function of magnitude and duration of hyperthermia. Fast cooling is accomplished. In other words, the faster you can cool them down, the better. I mean, if you've literally had a pond full of ice, I mean, putting that patient in the ice or cooling down however you possibly can is the best outcome, right? So you want to get the patient in shade, remove restrictive clothing, place ice and cold packs on the neck and in the groin area, okay? If you're going to be traveling in the desert during the summertime, have at least 4 ice packs. You can buy them on Amazon. They're pretty cheap, and they don't weigh a lot. It's not going to add a lot to your weight profile. So grab a few of those and put them on the neck for sure, and then in the groin area. And if you're part of a group, there's no reason why someone can't grab some ice packs. Okay. Wet the patient with cold, with water. If you got water, I'm sure it's not going to be cold. And then fan rapidly to facilitate evaporative cooling. I'm going to get into this a little bit more because I want to stress this point a lot about you can't just put water on somebody and then leave it. Okay. You have to fan it. Okay. So wrap the patient in cold, wet sheets. Obviously you don't, unless you're carrying sheets with you. Be able to cover the head, soak the sheets. We all carry those. There, you can buy them. You wet them and then snap them, and they become really cool. Any type of material that you have would be good. So general hypothermia treatment. Okay, shelter from the sun. Remove the heavy clothing. If you're wearing the abrasive and armored coats, just remove all that stuff. Hydrate with electrolytes and make sure they're able to drink first. Okay, so in moderate qualities, slow quantities, but just over time, electrolytes. Cool the patient, allow plenty of time to rehydrate. Cool the patient. Ice packs on the neck and groin area if it's more serious, the patient is really sick. That's a good way of going about it. This is kind of like the general treatment. 9.9% of the time, you're not going to have to deal with this. 99% of the time, you're just going to have to get out of the sun and start drinking some water and things like that. But here's what I wanted to mention, okay, about water on the skin and on clothing without being able to fan the patient. Water without wind is an insulator, and very, very important. If somebody's having a heat stroke and is really, really sick because they are overheated, and you pour water on them and just leave it there and there's no wind at all, okay, you're going to raise their internal body temperature, which is exactly opposite of what you want. So no matter what you can grab out of your gear, hopefully you're carrying a foam sleeping pad, because it would be great. Get a couple people on them and fan the patient a lot, and you will lower their internal body temperature very rapidly. So again, I'm going to read this. If you apply water to a person who is hyperthermic, you must fan or provide some sort of air movement to assist in the evaporative process. Okay, very, very important. All right, that's all there is, right? Ventilate yourself. We're going to talk about clothing later. I'm sure you guys got this all down to a science. There is shade. There is water in the desert. Okay. Our next video we're going to talk about simply water, what it means to the adventure rider, how much should you carry, how you should carry it, things like that. My name's Mark. I'm with Kytheramoto. Please subscribe to the channel. Please give a thumbs up, a like on the video. I'm not out to change the world. I'm just out to really just give some knowledge that I have to adventure motorcycle riders, because that's one of my passions, and to hopefully help your adventures become a little less hazardous, a little more comfortable maybe, and definitely a little safer. So we really appreciate it. Till next time, you take care.